They called it easy money. That's what Kemi said when she stepped out of that black SUV, laughing like the world owed her nothing. Mirenwa stood at the hostel gate that night, barefoot in the rain, watching cash spill from Kemi's purse onto the wet pavement. Bills that didn't matter, money that came too easily. Their eyes met for just a moment, and something inside Mirenwa cracked open like old wood under pressure. She didn't know it then, but that crack would let something in that she'd never get out. 2 months later, she would sit alone in a dim room on Christmas morning, staring at an envelope of cash she couldn't bring herself to touch. The money sat there on the table like a living thing, breathing, waiting. Outside, church bells rang across Abeokuta, calling people to celebrate the birth of a savior. Inside, Mirenwa's hands shook so badly she had to press them flat against her thighs. The Christmas lights on her wall blinked weakly, red, then green, then red again, casting shadows that moved wrong. Her phone vibrated once. A message from an unknown number lit up the screen. "It's time." Her breath caught in her throat. She whispered into the empty room, her voice breaking on every word. "If I had known what that money wanted from me, I would have stayed hungry. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let me take you back to where it started. Back before the money, before the choices, before everything changed. Back to when Mirenwa was just a girl trying to survive. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. New York, Toronto, or Lagos. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Mirenwa Adela was 21 years old and she carried exhaustion like a second skin. She studied at the teacher's college during the day and sold sachet water in the evenings, walking the hot streets with a basin balanced on her head until her neck ached and her feet swelled. The other students barely noticed her. She was the kind of girl who moved through spaces without leaving an impression, quiet and careful, always watching, always calculating how to make 50 naira stretch into 100. Every night she listened to voice notes from home that she never replied to. Her father's voice came through the phone speaker, thin and strained, his cough rattling in the background like stones in a can. "Mirenwa, your brother has stopped going to school. He says there's no point. I told him you're sacrificing, that education is the only way, but he doesn't listen anymore. Call when you can." She would press her palm against the phone until the message ended, then delete it without responding. What could she say? That she was barely surviving herself? That some nights she went to bed hungry so she'd have transport fare for the week? That the weight of being the family's only hope was crushing her into dust? She believed suffering silently was strength. She'd learned that from her mother, God rest her soul. Her mother who worked herself into an early grave without ever complaining, without ever asking for help, without ever admitting that the load was too heavy. Mirenwa had inherited that same stubborn pride, that same fear of being seen as weak. She told herself that if she could just hold on a little longer, if she could just push a little harder, everything would work out. God would provide. Suffering was temporary. Poverty was not her portion. But late at night, when the hostel was quiet and the other girls were asleep, she would kneel beside her thin mattress and whisper prayers that felt like they hit the ceiling and fell back down. "God, I'm tired of being strong. I'm tired of pretending I'm okay. I'm tired of watching everyone else have enough while I'm drowning. Just let me breathe once without worrying about money. Just once." She prayed like that for weeks, maybe months. She prayed until her knees hurt and her throat was dry. She never expected an answer. She definitely never expected the answer to come in the form it did. One night in late October, she was kneeling there in the dark, whispering her exhaustion to a God who felt very far away, when someone knocked on her door. 3 sharp raps that made her heart jump. She stood up slowly, wiping her face, trying to compose herself. When she opened the door, Zainab was standing there in the hallway, backlit by the fluorescent light, her face calm and unreadable. "You okay?" Zainab asked. Her voice was soft, almost gentle. Mirenwa nodded quickly, embarrassed to be caught vulnerable. "I'm fine, just praying." Zainab studied her for a long moment, her eyes moving across Mirenwa's face like she was reading something written there. Then she smiled, small and knowing. "Prayers are good, but sometimes God answers through people." She turned and walked away before Mirenwa could respond, her footsteps silent on the concrete floor. The hostel was a world unto itself, a small kingdom with its own rules and hierarchies and secrets. Kemi, Zainab, and Ruth ruled that kingdom from the top floor, three girls who moved through life like they owned it. Kemi was loud and glamorous, always dressed in new clothes, always smelling like expensive perfume, always laughing too hard at jokes that weren't funny. She had the kind of confidence that came from knowing men wanted her and would pay well for the privilege. Zainab was different, quieter, more polished. She spoke like someone who'd read books and traveled places, her English clean and precise, her movements deliberate. She was the strategist, the one who made plans while Kemi made noise. Ruth was the softest of the three, gentle-voiced and observant, the kind of girl who watched everything and said little. They came and went at odd hours, picked up by different men in different cars, always SUVs with tinted windows, always discreet. The security guards looked away when those cars pulled up. Everyone knew what was happening, but no one spoke about it directly. The hostel had two competing belief systems living side by side. On one wall, church flyers advertised revival services and prayer vigils, promises of breakthrough and divine provision. On the other wall, in the rooms upstairs, were wigs and makeup kits and bottles of champagne, the tools of a different kind of provision. The goat that wanders into the king's palace must eat what is offered. That's what the Yoruba elders say. Mirenwa thought about that proverb sometimes, watching Kemi step out of expensive cars with shopping bags, watching Zainab count money on her bed like it was nothing. One afternoon, Kemi caught Mirenwa staring. She laughed, not unkindly, and walked over to where Mirenwa was sitting on the corridor steps. "You look at us like we're aliens," Kemi said, sitting down beside her. "Like you can't understand how we live." Mirenwa looked away, uncomfortable. "I don't judge you," Kemi snorted. "Yes, you do. You sit here suffering like it's a badge of honor, like God is keeping score of how much pain you can endure. Let me tell you something, sister. Poverty is not holiness. Suffering is not a virtue. You think your father cares if the money that saves him came from a church offering or a rich man's wallet? Money is money." Mirenwa wanted to argue, wanted to defend her choices, but the words stuck in her throat, because part of her, a part she didn't want to acknowledge, knew Kemi was right. Zainab appeared at the top of the stairs watching them. She didn't say anything, just stood there with her arms crossed, measuring Mirenwa with those calm, calculating eyes. After Kemi walked away, Zainab came down and sat in the exact same spot. She didn't speak for a while, just sat there in silence, her presence somehow heavier than Kemi's had been. Finally, she asked one question, her voice low and serious. "If your family needed money tonight, right now, life or death, what wouldn't you do?" Mirenwa's mouth went dry. "I don't know what you mean." Zainab smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Yes, you do." She stood up and walked away, leaving Mirenwa sitting there with a question she couldn't answer and a fear she couldn't name. The call came 3 weeks later, just after midnight. Mirenwa was half asleep when her phone buzzed on the floor beside her mattress. Her aunt's name lit up the screen. She answered, her voice thick with sleep. "Auntie?" The sound on the other end was crying, panicked and desperate. "Mirenwa, your father collapsed. We're at the hospital. They're asking for money before they'll continue treatment. They're saying if we don't pay by tomorrow night, they'll discharge him." The world tilted. Mirenwa sat up too fast, her head spinning. "How much?" Her aunt named a figure that might as well have been $1 million. "I don't have it," Mirenwa whispered. "I don't have anything close to that." Her aunt was crying harder now. "Please, Mirenwa, you're in the city. You must know someone. You must be able to do something. He's your father. He's dying." Mirenwa ended the call and sat in the dark, her whole body numb. She grabbed her ATM card and ran to the machine near campus, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. She inserted the card with shaking hands and checked her balance. 7,300 naira. Not even enough for transport to the hospital and back. She tried to withdraw it anyway, just to have something in her hands, but the machine beeped error and swallowed her card. She stood there for a long time, staring at the blank screen, feeling something inside her break. When she finally walked back to the hostel, she didn't bother putting on her slippers. She walked barefoot through the rain, letting the water soak through her clothes, letting the cold seep into her skin. She felt nothing. She was empty. At the hostel gate, She looked up and saw Kemi getting out of a car. The man inside handed her something through the window, thick and wrapped in brown paper. Money. Kemi was laughing, her head thrown back, rain running down her face like she didn't even feel it. She turned and saw Mirenwa standing there, drenched and barefoot and broken. For a moment, neither of them moved. Kemi's smile faded. She looked at Mirenwa and seemed to understand everything without a single word being spoken. The car drove away. Kemi walked past her into the hostel. Mirenwa stood there in the rain and felt reality crack open. The life she'd despised, the choices she'd judged, might be the only door left. She went to Zainab the next morning, knocked on her door at dawn, before her pride could talk her out of it. Zainab opened the door already dressed, already awake, like she'd been expecting this. Mirenwa's voice came out small and ashamed. "I need advice." Zainab stepped aside to let her in. The room was neat and expensive, everything in its place. Perfume bottles lined up on the dresser like soldiers. Zainab sat on the bed and waited. Mirenwa told her everything. About her father, about the hospital, about the money she didn't have. She didn't ask for cash, she asked for advice. That was somehow worse. When she finished, Zainab was quiet for a long time, studying her with those two calm eyes. Finally, she spoke. "There are men who pay just for presents, dinner, conversation, companionship, no touch, no shame, especially during Christmas. They get lonely. They'll pay well just to not be alone." Mirenwa's stomach turned. "That's it?" Zainab nodded. "That's it. One night. Enough to cover your father's bills and more. You walk in clean, you walk out clean." It sounded too easy, too simple. Mirenwa looked at her hands, at the calluses from carrying water basins, at the rough skin from washing her clothes in cold water because she couldn't afford laundry service. She thought about her father's voice on those voice notes, getting weaker every time. She thought about her brother giving up on school because no one could afford to keep him there. She thought about her mother who worked until her heart gave out and died without ever having enough. She looked up at Zainab. "How do I start?" Zainab smiled, and this time it looked almost kind. "You already did." That night, Mirenwa followed them. Zainab, Kemi, and Ruth, all dressed well, but not provocatively, like they were going to church instead of wherever they were actually going. The car that picked them up was clean and quiet, the driver silent. They drove for 30 minutes into a part of Abeokuta Mirenwa had never seen, where the houses had gates and the streets had names. The house they stopped at was large but cold, expensive but empty feeling. No music, no laughter, just silence and money. Inside, men waited in a sitting room that smelled like leather and cologne. They were older, well-dressed, tired-looking. Zainab introduced Mirenwa to one of them, a man in his 50s with kind eyes and gray at his temples. "This is Uncle Femi," Zainab said. "He just wants company." Then she disappeared with the others into different rooms, and Mirenwa was alone with this stranger who'd paid to not be alone. He didn't touch her. He barely looked at her. He just talked about his wife who'd passed, about his children who never called, about power and loneliness and the weight of having everything and feeling empty. Mirenwa sat there and listened, her hands in her lap, her heart racing, waiting for the moment when he'd ask for more. But he never did. After 2 hours, he handed her an envelope and called the driver to take her back. "You're a good listener," he said. "Come back if you need to." In the car, Mirenwa opened the envelope. More money than she'd seen in months. Clean bills. New bills. She stared at them and felt a mix of relief and revulsion, so strong she thought she might be sick. But there were things she didn't notice. Small things. Strange things. A symbol carved into the door frame, geometric and deliberate, like something ancient. The way Zainab had watched her the entire time, even from across the room. The way Kemi and Ruth had looked at her when she came out, their faces unreadable. And later that night, when everyone was asleep, the way Zainab sent a text to someone, just 2 words. "She's clean." Mirenwa didn't see any of it. She was too busy counting the money, too busy planning how to get it to the hospital, too busy feeling grateful and guilty in equal measure. The money smelled faintly like iron. She didn't think anything of it. She paid her father's bills the next day, dropped the cash at the hospital like it was burning her hands. Her aunt cried and thanked God. Her father recovered faster than the doctors expected. A miracle, they said. Divine intervention. Mirenwa said nothing. She went back to school and tried to forget the house, the man, the money. Tried to go back to her normal life of water selling in silence. But things had changed. Small things at first. She started having dreams where she counted money that never ran out. Endless stacks that multiplied as soon as she touched them. She'd wake up sweating, her fingers cramping like she'd been counting all night. Her reflection started doing things wrong, moving a second too slow, blinking out of rhythm. She told herself it was stress, exhaustion, her mind playing tricks. Zainab started treating her differently, not like a friend, like property, like something owned. She'd appear at random times, asking questions that seemed casual but weren't. How do you feel? Any changes? Any dreams? When Mirenwa asked why, Zainab would smile and say it was nothing, just checking in, but her eyes said something else. Her eyes said she was monitoring something, tracking something, waiting for something to happen. The other girls noticed too. Kemi stopped making jokes around her. Ruth watched her with something that looked like pity. The hostel felt different now, like Mirenwa had crossed an invisible line and couldn't cross back. 3 weeks before Christmas, Zainab came to her room late at night. She sat on the edge of Mirenwa's mattress uninvited, her face serious in the darkness. There's another opportunity, she said. Different level. Christmas is special. There's a gathering, private, exclusive. Only 3 girls. She paused, letting the weight of it settle. One night, 8 million naira. Mirenwa's breath caught. 8 million. More money than her father would make in 10 years. Enough to change everything. Enough to never worry again. Enough to send her brother back to school, to fix their house, to finally breathe. Zainab watched her calculate, watched the hunger and fear battle in her eyes. What do they want? Mirenwa asked. Zainab's smile was gentle and terrible. This one changes lives. But Mirenwa noticed something that made her stomach turn. Zainab never attended these gatherings herself. She arranged them. She recruited for them. She prepared the girls and sent them off. But she never went. When Mirenwa asked her about it, Zainab's face went blank. I've already paid my price, she said. Now I help others pay theirs. It wasn't an answer. It was a warning Mirenwa didn't understand until it was too late. Christmas Eve came cold and heavy with rain. The car that picked them up had no license plates. Mirenwa sat in the back between Kemi and Ruth. All 3 of them dressed in white like brides or sacrifices. No one spoke. The driver said nothing. The city lights faded behind them as they drove into darkness, down roads that didn't have names, past houses that looked abandoned. When they finally stopped, Mirenwa's hands were shaking so badly she had to clench them into fists. The house was different from the first one, circular, old, the kind of building that felt wrong, that sat on the land like it didn't belong there. Inside, candles burned in every corner. Red cloth covered the walls. The air smelled like incense and something else, something organic and wrong. Men waited in a center room, but these weren't the lonely businessmen from before. These men looked at them like they were examining merchandise, like they were counting value and cost. An older woman stood among them. Her face painted white, her eyes hard. She spoke in Yoruba, her voice flat and ceremonial. The rules were simple. Drink first, no refusal after, no protection. Mirenwa felt her throat close up. This wasn't dinner and conversation. This wasn't presence and companionship. This was something else entirely, something she'd walked into with her eyes half closed because she'd wanted so desperately to believe it would be easy. Zainab stood by the door watching. When Mirenwa looked at her, Zainab's expression was almost sad. She walked over and took Mirenwa's hand, squeezed it once, hard. We already crossed the river, she whispered. Why fear the wet? Then she let go and stepped back, and Mirenwa understood. There was no leaving. The choice had been made the moment she got in the car, maybe even before that. Maybe the moment she first took money from Uncle Femi. The door closed behind Zainab. A lock clicked. Someone handed Mirenwa a cup. The liquid inside was dark and smelled bitter. She looked at Kemi and Ruth. They were both crying silently, but they were drinking. She thought about her father, about her brother, about the 8 million naira that would change everything. She thought about her mother who died with nothing. She raised the cup to her lips and drank. It tasted like earth and metal. The choice was sealed. What happened in that house, Marenwa never spoke about. Not in full. Not ever. There are things that live better in silence, things that lose their power when dragged into light, and things that gain power from being spoken. She remembered pain. She remembered hands. She remembered voices chanting in a language she didn't know. She remembered staring at the ceiling and counting the candles until the flames blurred together. She remembered the moment when something inside her went quiet and still, like a part of her soul had simply stepped aside to let the night pass over her. When morning came, they were released. 8 million naira each, divided into neat stacks, handed over like wages for work completed. The three of them rode back to the hostel in silence. No one cried anymore. Crying was for people who still had something left to lose. Days passed, then weeks. Marenwa felt fine. Better than fine. She felt strong, energized, like something had been unlocked inside her. She sent money home. Her brother went back to school. Her father's health improved completely. Everything was working out exactly as promised. But Ruth started bleeding. Not her monthly cycle. Something else. Something constant and unexplainable. She went to 3 different hospitals. They ran every test. They found nothing wrong. But the bleeding didn't stop. Kemi's skin started peeling. Not like a rash or sunburn. Like her body was shedding itself. She'd wake up with strips of skin on her sheets, her arms raw and weeping. Doctors gave her creams and antibiotics and looked at her like she was contagious. Nothing helped. Marenwa was the only one who stayed healthy, perfect, untouched. That's when the guilt started eating her alive. She'd sit with Ruth in the hospital, holding her hand while she grew paler and weaker, wondering why it was happening to her and not to Marenwa. She'd watch Kemi wrap her arms in bandages and avoid mirrors, and feel sick with the knowledge that she'd escaped whatever curse had found them. One night, Kemi looked at her with hollow eyes and whispered the question that haunted all of them. Why you? Why not you? Marenwa had no answer. Ruth died on a Tuesday morning in January. The doctors called it organ failure of unknown origin. Her family came and collected her body and asked no questions because they didn't want answers. The hostel went quiet after that. Girls who used to laugh in the corridors walked on tiptoe. Everyone knew something was wrong, but no one knew what to call it. Marenwa went to Zainab's room and found her packing, not like she was moving out, like she was running. Clothes thrown into bags, drawers emptied onto the floor. That careful composure finally cracked. Marenwa grabbed her arm. What did you do to us? Zainab pulled away, her eyes wild. I didn't do anything. I was just the door. You chose to walk through. Marenwa's voice came out sharp and desperate. Ruth is dead. Kemi is falling apart. I need to know what happened in that house. Zainab stopped packing and looked at her with something like pity. Not everyone pays with their body, she said quietly. Some pay with others. The truth spilled out slowly, reluctantly, like poison being drained from a wound. The ritual demanded balance. Someone had to suffer. Someone had to carry the blessing, and someone had to remain untouched to carry the debt forward. Marenwa felt the world tilt. You knew, Zainab nodded. I knew. They always choose one girl to stay clean. The desperate one. The silent one. The one who won't ask questions because she's too afraid of the answers. Marenwa's voice broke. Why me? Zainab's laugh was bitter. Because you were perfect for it. You'd already been starving yourself, punishing yourself, suffering in silence like it meant something. They could smell it on you. Desperation. Guilt. The belief that you deserved nothing good. That's what they feed on. She zipped up her bag and walked toward the door. The money you took opened a door. Now something's standing in that doorway waiting. You can close it or you can let it in. But either way, it won't leave until it gets what it's owed. Marenwa sat alone in that empty room for hours after Zainab left. The 8 million naira felt like a weight sitting on her chest, crushing her ribs, making it hard to breathe. She thought about burning it, throwing it away, returning it somehow. But she'd already spent some of it. Her family was already living better because of it. How do you return money that's already been turned into food, medicine, school fees? How do you undo a choice that's already changed everything? She decided she had to try. She had to at least try. The next morning, she found a local spiritual elder, an older man, who lived on the outskirts of town and helped people with problems that doctors and lawyers couldn't fix. She told him everything. He listened without interrupting, his face grave. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time. Finally, he spoke. Money taken under oath doesn't return empty-handed. It came with terms. Those terms don't expire just because you're sorry. Mirenwa felt tears burning her eyes. How do I break it? The elder looked at her with something like sadness. To undo it, you must confess publicly. Speak what happened out loud, with witnesses, and accept whatever shame follows. Or you offer something dearer than money. Mirenwa's voice was barely a whisper. What could be dearer than money? The elder didn't answer. He didn't have to. She already knew. The messages started coming that night. Unknown numbers, different phones. Always the same word. Choose. Over and over, every few hours, buzzing her phone awake in the darkness. Choose. She stopped sleeping, stopped eating. She'd sit in her room staring at the money stacked on her table, feeling it watch her back. Kemi came to see her once, her arms completely bandaged now, her voice weak. Whatever you're thinking of doing, don't sacrifice yourself for us. When it's too late for that, just survive. That's all any of us can do now. She left before Mirenwa could respond. 2 days later, Mirenwa heard that Kemi had disappeared. Not dead, just gone. Her room cleared out overnight, her phone disconnected, her family claiming they hadn't seen her. Some girls said she'd run away. Others said she'd been taken. No one knew for sure. Christmas morning came again, exactly 1 year later. Church bells rang across the city. Mirenwa sat alone in her room, the same room where this had all started, staring at the money she still had left. The weight of silence pressed down on her like something physical. Her whole life she'd believed that suffering quietly was strength, that keeping secrets was survival, that asking for help was weakness. That belief had led her here. That pride had opened the door. She pulled out her phone and opened a voice note, recording herself, preparing to send a confession to everyone she knew, her father, her brother, her friends, the church. She spoke for 10 minutes, her voice shaking, telling them everything. What she'd done, where the money came from, what it had cost. When she finished, she stared at the recording for a long time, then she deleted it. Not out of pride this time, out of something else, understanding. The ritual didn't want exposure. It wanted permission, and she'd already given that the moment she stayed silent. She stood up, her legs unsteady. She grabbed the money, every naira she had left, and shoved it into a bag. Then she walked out of the hostel into the bright morning, into the sound of church bells and Christmas songs, and headed back toward that house. The roads were empty. The city felt deserted. Everyone was inside with family, celebrating, eating, laughing. She walked alone. When she reached the house, it looked different in daylight, smaller, shabbier. The door was unlocked. She pushed it open and stepped inside. The men were waiting in the same circular room, but they looked older now, tired, like time moved differently for them. The woman with the painted face smiled when she saw Mirenwa. You came back. Mirenwa dropped the bag of money on the floor. It landed heavy and final. I'm returning it, all of it. I renounce whatever agreement was made. I name it. I reject it. You have no claim on me. The men looked at each other and laughed, not cruelly, almost gently, like she'd said something naive and childish. One of them stood up slowly. The ritual didn't want your body, he said. It wanted your permission, your silence, your willingness to take what you knew was wrong and pretend it was just money. Mirenwa felt her chest tighten. I'm breaking my silence now, the man nodded. Too late for that, but not too late to choose what happens next. You can walk away and live with what you carry, or you can stay and give back what you took in a different form. She understood then, the something dearer than money, the price for undoing what she'd done, herself, not her body, her future, her freedom, the life she'd been trying so desperately to build. She looked at the money on the floor, thought about Ruth, dead in a hospital bed, thought about Kemi, disappeared, thought about Zainab running, thought about all the girls who would come after her if she didn't stop this now. She took a breath and spoke. I'll stay. I'll give back what I took, but you leave everyone else alone. No more girls, no more debts. It ends with me. The men looked surprised. The woman's smile faded. For a moment, no one moved. Then the candles in the room flickered wildly, every flame bending in the same direction, like something was passing through. One of the men collapsed, clutching his chest. Another screamed and stumbled backward. The woman's face went pale beneath her white paint. Mirenwa felt something shift inside her, something cold and vast letting go. The room went silent. She was still standing, still breathing, still alive. But something had been taken, something she couldn't name, something that had been hers since birth. She walked out of that house and didn't look back. The money stayed where she dropped it. She never knew if they picked it up or if it rotted there on the floor. She didn't care anymore. The walk back to the hostel took hours. Her legs felt weak. Her vision kept blurring. But she made it. When she got to her room, the Christmas lights were still blinking on the wall. Red, then green, then red. She sat down on her mattress and felt nothing. No relief, no triumph, just emptiness. Months passed. Mirenwa went back to her quiet life. She sold water again. She studied. She sent small amounts of money home when she could. Earned the honest way, even if it wasn't enough. Her father stayed healthy. Her brother stayed in school. But she never spoke about what happened. Never told anyone the full story. Some people asked about Ruth, about Kemi, about the sudden money that had come and gone. She just said she didn't know. And in a way, that was true. She didn't know what that ritual had really been, didn't know what those men had wanted or what they'd taken from her. She just knew that she'd survived and others hadn't, and that knowledge sat in her chest like a stone. Zainab was never found. Some said she went abroad. Others said she'd gone back to her village. A few girls whispered that she'd been taken just like Kemi. Mirenwa didn't search for her, didn't want to know. The hostel slowly returned to normal. New girls moved in. Life continued. The church flyers went back up on the walls. The top floor rooms were filled with different people. Everything moved on like nothing had happened. But Mirenwa knew. She carried it with her. The weight of choices made in desperation. The cost of silence. The price of easy money. She never got that 8 million naira life. Never achieved the breakthrough she'd prayed for. She stayed small and careful and quiet, working her way through school one day at a time, 1 naira at a time, slowly and honestly and alone. Some nights she'd dream about counting money that never ran out, and she'd wake up gasping, her hands cramping. Some days her reflections still moved wrong, lagging just a second behind. She learned to live with it, learned to accept that some prices get paid in ways you don't notice until years later, in small losses that add up to something vast. On Christmas Eve, exactly 2 years after that night, she sat in her room and thought about everything that had happened. The desperation, the choice, the ritual, the cost. She thought about Ruth, who died, and Kemi, who disappeared, and Zainab, who ran. She thought about all the other girls across the city, across the country, who were sitting in rooms just like this one, hungry and desperate and willing to believe that there was such a thing as easy money. She wanted to warn them somehow, wanted to write it on every wall, wanted to shout it from every rooftop, but she knew it wouldn't matter. Hunger doesn't listen to warnings. Desperation doesn't respect caution. Every girl has to learn for herself that some doors, once opened, can never be fully closed. She whispered into the silence of her small room, her voice steady now, no longer shaking. Some money feeds you once, but eats from you forever? Outside, church bells began to ring. Somewhere in the city, another girl was making a choice she'd regret. Another door was opening. Another debt was being written in blood and silence. Mirenwa sat in the dark and listened to the bells and knew there was nothing she could do to stop it. She'd saved herself. That was all anyone could do. Save yourself and carry the weight of what it cost. She closed her eyes and tried to pray, but the words wouldn't come. They hadn't come in a long time. Maybe they never would again. That was the price. Not her body, not her life, but something smaller and deeper. The part of her that had believed in easy answers and divine rescue. That part was gone. What remained was just a girl who knew better now, who understood that every choice carries weight and that some debts take a lifetime to pay. The Christmas lights blinked on her wall, red, then green, then red. She watched them until she fell asleep, and in her dreams, She counted money that never ran out, her hands moving automatically, the bills multiplying endlessly beneath her fingers. And somewhere far away, someone was whispering a word she couldn't quite hear. A name, a claim, a reminder that some things once given are never fully returned. She woke up with the dawn, her hands empty, her room cold, her future uncertain. But she was alive. She was free. And that, she told herself, that had to be enough.